guys, I'm so excited about today's video. I'm going to be walking you through a technique on how to apply a gray wash finish on wood. So you may have seen our recent tutorial on our latest project, which was a cookbook stand. It was so fun to make, so go check out that video if you haven't seen it yet. But on that project, we did a gray wash finish, and today we're doing a deep dive into how we did that and some tips and tricks that I learned along the way, because this was my first time doing that type of finish. So if you want a gray wash finish, there's a few different ways that you can achieve this, and we're just going to try one of those today in the video, and I'll show you how to do that. But here are all the different ways that you could do it. First, you can apply a gray stain. They make plenty of gray stains out there. There's weathered finish ones. There's aging type of stains, and that if you just apply it straight to the wood, you'll get sort of a gray wash look. Another way that you can do it, still using stain, but adding in paint, is this is the method that we are doing, is apply a dark wood stain to the piece and then go over it with a watered down white paint. So when you mix the dark stain with the white paint, light and dark, black and white, you get gray. So that's the method that we're going to be doing. Another few methods that you could do, you could paint the whole piece with either a white or a light gray paint and then go over it sort of with a watered down or very light brushing of another type of gray, like a darker gray. With this method, it's great because the coverage is nice, and a lot of people have gray and white paint sitting around their home, but you don't get the wood grain showing through that you do with the other gray wash finish. So it kind of just looks like a mimicked gray wash. So you don't get that good wood grain that I really love. And then another way that you could do a gray wash is doing a dry brushing technique with gray paint over your wood. And that's just taking like an old ratty paintbrush. It doesn't need to be anything nice. And getting a little bit of paint on the brush, wiping most of it off on a paper towel, and then brushing it over your piece and leaving some of the wood exposed. So those are the few methods that I am aware of for how to gray wash paint. Today we're going to try that method with a dark stain and a watered down white paint over top. So you want to start by doing your first layer of this gray wash technique with a dark wood stain. You want to work the stain into the wood with the direction of the wood grain by wiping it with a rag, let it sit for a couple of minutes, and then wipe off the excess with a dry rag. Then before moving on, let that stain dry thoroughly. You can just check the instructions on the back of your can of stain to see how long it takes for the stain to dry. And we are using dark walnut wood stain here. After the wood stain has dried, you can move on to doing the watered down paint. And we're gonna mix the white paint with 50% ratio with water. And the watered down paint gives it kind of that wash characteristic that we're going for, meaning that the paint cover is going to be opaque and see-through. So even though a paint is applied over the stain, you're still gonna be able to see that wood grain. So you just wanna start by mixing the paint and water. And I just kind of guessed a 50% ratio here. And you can either use like a plastic disposable cup, or I'm using a handy paint cup here. It works great. And then once it's mixed up, you can paint it on. And I just used like a cheap foam paintbrush to paint it directly on over the dried stain. And you can see here, I'm just brushing it in with the wood grain. And I made a small little mistake here, or basically a lesson learned. So what you can see here is that I did about half of it painted, and then I moved on to wiping it down. What I would have done if I would have been doing this a second time is I would have painted that whole surface all the way across before moving on to wiping it down, and you'll see why here in a second. So for wiping the paint off, you want to try to get it within about 30 seconds or so before it has a chance to dry on the surface. And to wipe it off, you want to use a dry lint-free rag. And depending on how small your project is, you should attempt to try to paint the entire surface, one surface, and then move on to wiping it all off at once, like I mentioned. So I'm done with the first coat. It was relatively easy. The issues I'm running into is anywhere where the paint touched twice, you can definitely see. So like I overlapped right here in one spot, and then there was some paint that had gotten on it before I flipped it over, up here and here. And then this spot here in the middle is another spot where it overlapped because I had to do one side and then the other side. So it is what it is. So what I was doing to combat this was just lightly sanding it with a sanding block, and I was planning on doing another coat with just more water in it, so it was more watered down. But now that I've got this a little bit sanded, I'm kind of loving the way it's looking once some of that paint comes off. It almost just looks distressed. I think I'm probably gonna leave it. I've gotten rid of the blotchiness. It's still dusty because I've been sanding, but if you look on the back where it was really bad, I've gotten those splotches completely off just by sanding, and it looks nice and distressed. So I'm really liking the way it looks. So I'm probably just gonna wipe it off with a wet cloth and see what the finish looks like. But that was a great way to combat that, was just sanding it down. Now the very last step is to seal it. I went with this clear spray lacquer finish that I use very often. It's very easy to apply, it dries quickly, and it does not yellow on light painted surfaces. You could also use a polyacrylic as an alternative to the lacquer. Whatever you do though, do not use a polyurethane because it will yellow over your finish and become sort of amber colored. So I don't think that's what you want. So you want to either use this clear spray lacquer or a polyacrylic finish. I absolutely love how our cookbook stand turned out with that gray wood wash look. And it really kind of reminds me of like restoration hardware or like a Pottery barn gray wood finish. And it was pretty easy to do yourself. So hopefully by following along with this step-by-step video tutorial, you can get this look too. If you have any other questions about this process or any of our DIY projects, feel free to let me know in the comments. While you're here, we'd love it if you would subscribe to our channel. We share weekly DIY and renovating videos, and then check this video out next. All right, guys, see you next week. Bye-bye.